Hello everyone. I'm aware that most of you belong to different disciplines and English literature is only a common course paper for you. The book title, Ways with Words, prescribed by the University of Calicut, contains some very interesting works by world famous writers. But I'm sure that the first name that flashes across your mind when you hear the words English literature is definitely Shakespeare. It is Shakespeare's Sonnet 29 that is prescribed for you. But before I move on to the poem, let me just give you a very brief biographical sketch of this great writer. William Shakespeare was born on April 23rd, on April 23, 1564, at Stratford upon Avon, and he died on April 26, 1616. He was popularly known as the Bard of Avon, and he was the third of 8 children. His parents were John and Mary Arden Shakespeare. Mary was the daughter of a wealthy landowner, and John was a glove maker and a local politician. Shakespeare is said to have been educated at King Edward VI Grammar School in Stratford, and he married Anne Hathaway in 1582, and they had 3 children together. The first daughter was Susanna, and his twins, Judith and Hamlet, were born in 1585. And sometime between 1585 and 1592, he moved to London and began working in the theatre there, which actually set the tone for his career in the field. He, as we all know, is a versatile genius, was a versatile genius. He was a poet, playwright, and actor, and excelled in all of these fields. And he's said to have written around 30 plays and 154 sonnets. Now, what is a sonnet? The word sonnet originates from the Italian word sonetto, meaning a little song. It is a lyric poem of 14 lines written mostly in iambic pentameter. And a lyric poem is a short, personal poem that expresses the thoughts and feelings of the speaker, mostly subjective in nature. Iambic pentameter is a line with 10 beats. An iamb is basically 2 beats or 1 foot, and penta obviously means 5. So iambic pentameter has 5 feet, and a foot is made up of, in the case of an iamb, it's made up of an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. And there are 3 types of sonnets, basically 3 types originally: the Petrarchan sonnet, the Spenserian sonnet, and the Shakespearean sonnet. A Petrarchan sonnet is also known as an Italian sonnet, and it contains an octave, 8 lines, and a sestet, 6 lines, totally amounting to 14 lines. And the rhyme scheme begins with ABBA, 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 and conclude with any variation of CD and E, CD, E, CDE, or CD, CDEE. The turn or the volta or the twist in subject matter or the response must or normally occurs between the octave and the sestet. As for a Shakespearean sonnet, which was initiated by Edmund Spenser, there are 3 quatrains and a couplet. The rhyme scheme is AB, AB, BC, BC, CD, CD, EE, and the turn is the couplet. The Shakespearean sonnet is also called an English sonnet, and it includes 3 quatrains and a couplet. The rhyme scheme is often AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, and GG. The turn or the volta is either after 8 lines or 10 lines. We should also understand that a sonnet is also an argument. It builds up in a certain way, and how it builds up is related to its metaphors and how it moves from one metaphor to the next. In a Shakespearean sonnet, the argument builds up like this. The first quatrain There's an exposition of the main theme and the main metaphor. The second quatrain, the theme and metaphor are extended further or are complicated. Often some imaginative example is given. And in the third quatrain, we have the peripetia or the twist or the volta or the reversal of fortunes, which is often introduced by words like but or yet. And it often leads of the ninth line. The final couplet summarizes and leaves the reader with a new concluding image. Sonnet 29 is said to be one of the best sonnets of Shakespeare, and it deals with the themes of love, hopelessness, and resurgence. And it was first published in 1609. About it deals with the fate of an unfortunate man frustrated with his state of mind, his present state of mind, and also illustrates the power and impact of true love, how love reassures one's faith and confidence in himself. This is how the first quatrain goes. When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. In the first four lines, Shakespeare presents a situation of considerable despair and dejection for the speaker of the poem. Fortune is personified by the poet, and it can mean luck or fate or even wealth. And the phrase "in disgrace with fortune" suggests that fortune itself is making judgments about the speaker. The next three lines of the poem register these effects on the speaker's life. He's alone, he's alienated, he's an outcast, and he weeps over his condition and he prays to heaven for relief. But unfortunately, all his prayers are bootless, they are useless. That is, God has turned a deaf ear to all his grievances, and this leads him to curse his fate. Again, it is to be noted that deaf heaven is an example of a transferred epithet, because here it is a God who is deaf and not heaven as such. The next quatrain, the second quatrain, goes like this: wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Shakespeare extends the theme of depression and dejection by comparing himself with other fortunate men. He compares himself with people who are more privileged than himself in terms of his physical appearance, in terms of his wealth, in terms of his popularity with friends, in terms of his wealth, in terms of his own talents and perspectives. This further, pushes him down, pushes him up, makes him feel more low, and his mental state is explored in detail in this particular quatrain. To give you more details, he wishes that he was like someone more optimistic. He wants to be like someone who is more physically beautiful. When he says featured like him with better physical features, and he also wants to be popular with more friends around him. When he says friends possessed, he wants to be like someone who has made a place for himself with his talents and his skill, and he also wants to be someone he wants to possess someone else's freedom to act and realize his dreams. He wants to have the vision and outlook of other men. These lines thus imply that the poet is obsessed with other people and their successes, their wealth and influence, and this obsession has made him neglect what he basically enjoyed and loved best, probably his own talents and probably the gift of love which he has and he seems to have forgotten, at least for a while. The third quatrain, in the third quatrain, the argument takes an interesting turn with the familiar yet. But let me read out the lines first. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at daybreak, at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. The poetic persona, during his self-loathing, by chance happens to think about his love, and there is this sudden shift in his mood and his mental state, and he's happy again. He's happy again. And the lark, like we all know, is a bird that symbolizes the morning and greets the morning with his beautiful song. His rising spirit and happiness is compared to the lark flying up into the sky from the dull earth at the break of day and sings hymns at the doors of heaven. This quatrain is suffused with the beautiful figures of speech that makes this particular quatrain all the more interesting. The comparison to the lark is a simile. The reference to the sullen earth is his own dull state of mind, and this again is a metaphor. Again, the song of the skylark is made divine by comparing it to the hymns at heaven's gate, which again is a metaphor. The repetition of the consonant her is an example of alliteration when he says hymns at heaven's gate. Again, the exaggerated comparison used to show his changing mood is a hyperbole. Thus, love not only improves his mood, transforming him into a singing bird, but it also reconciles him to his own dejected state, to the society in which he lives, and it helps him regain his confidence and his trust in himself, and also helps him to come to terms with what he is and his present state of affairs. The couplet at the end is a beautiful set of two lines that vibrates with positivity. It actually resonates with positive vibes. The very memory of the thought of his love brings him out of his dejected state. He refers to this happiness as wealth, which is incomparable. He further states that he would never trade or exchange this wealth of love and joy with anything else, not even if he's offered the position of a king or even if he's offered the throne. In his typical style, Shakespeare provides a positive twist at the end of the sonnet, which makes the sonnet all on universal in its appeal. It's a timeless sonnet, and I hope that you loved it. Actually, I've given you, rather than a PowerPoint and giving you just points to elaborate upon, I have given you the details. I've added the explanations to the stanza, I mean to the quatrains, so that it would help you with your examination. Thank you and all the best.